Hello, Serge here, coming to you from the PGA Golf Learning Center in Port St. Lucie, Florida, where we're doing a peak performance golf school. Today, we started the day off by having a question and answer session about what we talked about and all the things we did the day before. And it was after we had a little bit of a hitting session to start the day, and then we went into this question and answer. And the first question that I got was a really good one. One of the students, Ed, started out by saying, well, I started hitting balls here today, and I was hitting the ball a lot of really good shots, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, I just chunked one into the ground and the ball barely went over there. And he said almost every time I'm either practicing or playing and I'm hitting the ball pretty good, I really think I'm, so to speak, getting in the groove, and then wham, out of nowhere, I'll chunk one where I'll hit the ground, the ball will barely move, or I chunk it, it just pops up, or I'll block it right or left. It's a swing just basically falls apart. He said, what do you think happens? I said, well, first and foremost, if you haven't lost your balance, which in most cases with the shots you're describing, you'd lose your balance, but if you haven't, check your alignment out. He says, well, today there was no problem with it because I knew I was lining up pretty good. I had the alignment arrows on the ground. So he said, it wasn't that. I said, okay, with that out of the equation, then the next thing I think you need to do is you need to stop for a second, and whether you need to close your eyes or whatever, put yourself into a memory mode where you can try to imagine what did that last swing feel like, and can you figure or find out anything in that swing that felt out of the ordinary that would cause it to, so to speak, crash. And he stopped for a second, he thought about it, and he said, yeah, you know, realistically, when that happens, I always feel like my hips got loosed. I said, ooh, your hips got loose. And I said, what can that lead us to think about could be a problem here? And he said, well, I don't know, too much motion in them. And I said, yes, but you know, that would be the effect of something. So what would the actual cause really be? I said, remember when we talk about our swing being built and our setup being built for the swing from the ground up, we have one box which would be from our ankles to our knees, then we have the knees to the hips as the second box, and the hips to the shoulders. And we always want to basically stay stacked on our boxes so we don't get out of sync. And as you know, you're talking about your hips now, your hips are the top of the middle box, and the knees would be the top of the bottom box. And they're the middle box. And I said, if your hips are going, it's very likely your knees are going. So I think you need to probably think about that. Are you focusing enough on the wide knees, outward pressure to maintain your knees? Because just remember, if you feel like your hips are getting loose, and he said, yeah, and when they loose, I kind of collapse downward. I said, right, well, think. If you get into too much knee action and your forward knee kicks in a little bit and your back knee straightens out, what's going to happen when that action of in and back and straightening goes the other way? At some point when this starts to straighten, this one collapses in, and this one will be a lot worse going down. Because why? Once you're swinging downward, you get the energy of going into in the forward swing, hitting the ball and coming up. So now you transitioned, you get all this extra speed coming down, and at the last second, as this one straightens up, that one collapses. I think that's a good probability of what your chunk is. So what it comes down to again is that the knees are your levelers and stabilizers, and you always want to feel that you move your knees relatively level. And we can only move them so much, a little bit more than 1 or 2 inches. This knee's going down, that leg's going back, and then as you go the other way, the equal and opposite will be this one starts to go back and straighten, and that one collapses down. And as I said, it's worse going down. So the knees are critical. The knees are your levelers and stabilizers. And if you're finding that you're hitting a lot of chunks and then to stop a chunk pulling out of the shot, think about your connection to the ground, feet to knees, and when that bottom box stays stable, the middle box stays stable, the top box, which supports the shoulders and the head, are staying stable. So the knees are really important. These are levelers and stabilizers. Keep them level and stable, and I guarantee you, you'll start hitting the ball more solid and straight and longer. And that's the answer to hitting the ball more consistent and shooting lower scores. Well, that's it for the search today from back to you at the PGA Learning Center, and I'll be talking to y'all again soon.